Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1. We're up to chapter 172, page Samach, which means Samach to Samach. Samach as Shin Mem Ches, 348, Samach as in Simcha. When you learn Chassidus, it's supposed to bring you Simcha, which is exactly what we're in the middle of learning right now. We're in the middle of discourse 43, Veschanan. And just to give a summary, we've moved on to another theme, not another theme, a continuing theme, but it's developing into a new subplot has begun. The subplot you can call one word. You may be familiar with this word. It's called Torah. What is Torah? Everyone thinks they may know. Well, you'll be surprised at what he says here. But the concept of Torah, this is the first time really the Ayin Beis is tackling this topic, Torah. I mean, it's been mentioned obviously many times. Torah, mitzvahs, in the context that Torah is connected more to Pnimi and mitzvahs more to Makif. Where all the way in the beginning of the discourse of the Hemshech, he spoke about how Torah is individualized. Each person has different responsibility of Torah. Let's say a Baal Esek, a business person, it's one chapter in the morning, one chapter in the evening. A person who's has more time and less work is involved more in Torah. Whereas mitzvahs is an equalizer. Mitzvahs is Ratzon Elyon and Torah is Chachma. The reason I'm mentioning it is because it's a fundamental theme in Ayin Beis. Ratzon and Chachma, basically Makif and Pnimi. Keser and Chachma. Chachma being the beginning of all the 10 spheres. So Chachma is an internalizer. Ratzon is I would say, a divine expression. So when we do a mitzvah, we connect to the expression of the divine, not so much on our terms. I mean, Chachma is more the divine on your terms. That's why we understand it, we comprehend it. It's tailored to us. So Torah is a very fundamental piece of Ayin Beis' interface, because Torah is connected to Chachma, which has been the theme the last chapters that we were learning. If you remember about time and space, we were learning how Torah is an interface. Because Torah comes from Atzilus, Chachma of Torah comes from the Chachma of Atzilus, the wisdom of Atzilus. Prior to that, even higher, the Chachma of Ak. So what we were discussing, and that's really the context here, is that the wisdom of Ak, or Ak in general, is an interface as an aklal to a prat. So the way God created the universe is, once you already have a relationship, and there's an application, God is applying himself to existence, so he does so also in gradations. It's not like when God applies himself to existence, he's all the way here. So first it's a klal. Like first we give you the general picture, the blueprint, the snapshot. Then that klal comes into details. Break it down. So that creates further relationship and a closer relationship between us and the divine. So there's a relationship with the divine or rather the interface with the divine as is completely, infinitely distant from us. That requires a tzimtzum, a radical jump, a quantum leap. It requires understanding the idea of Eir, that in the Eir Ein Sof there's an Eir HaGvul that envisions existence. That's all so-called on a divine level. But once there is a tzimtzum, and once there's an application, the divine applies itself, there too, it doesn't just jump from the kav right after the tzimtzum to this world. It's going to go through infinite multitude amount of diminishments and tzimtzumim and parsas. And the process begins with Ak, with a klal. That's the key. And Torah is also structured like klal and prat. That's what we learned in the previous chapter. That chapters, chapter 170 primarily. The Torah too, God didn't just say revelation, didn't just reveal himself. He broke it into details. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe, Daber el Bnei Yisrael Lemer, as he explained every word, exactly every letter of that phrase that I just said. What was Vaydaber? What is Hashem? Vaydaber is Hamshacha, transmitting Hashem is Chachma, El Moshe is Yesod Abba, Daber el Bnei Yisrael is Netzach and Heid, and Lemer is Malchus. So he brings it down, so Torah comes down to detail. And different parshas, every parsha, we know the different parshas are separated, each one said in different times, and discuss different mitzvahs, and each one has its own narrative, and so on. So he's explained that Torah is also klal and prat. So too, the klal is more the snapshot, the bird's eye view. the bird's eye view. And then there's the Torah that comes into detail. And with that he reconciled, based on Tzemach Tzedek actually, but the Rebbe Rashav elaborates between them Machlekes and Gemara, and Gittin, the two opinions how the Torah was given. Was it given by Sinai, Chsuma Nitna, as one sealed entity, like the whole thing was given, and then it played itself out? Which would of course beg the question: how does a Pasha Kairach or a Pasha of even Chet Egel or anything like that happen when it was all given in one? But there's such an opinion. Another opinion is Megillah Nitna, that it was given Megillah meaning scroll by scroll. In other words, as it developed through the Midbar, that's when the Torah was given. Hashem revealed that part, and the Torah Shabbat
was that not given.
Huh?
According to second opinion.
Yeah, right. Matan Torah would have been given Asher Sadibris and the events that happened at that time. The question, in other words, is: was given in time? Was it given before time, so to speak, before it happened? So he answers. He says, "Shnei emes." If you talk from the snapshot of Ak, how the Torah is a klal chsuma. That's the title also chsuma maimer sosim. It was also given not just chsuma. It literally means like a full sealed case, but chsuma also means sealed in the sense of it's a maimer sosim. That means if you and I would read it, we probably would not understand the pasha. I mean, we read the words, but it probably would not be able to fully see the details. And Megillah Nitna is also true. That actually happened as well. That came out each time what was revealed at its particular time. Megillah also comes from the word Gilui. I heard that in my class that I gave a year and a half ago. That was recorded. I was listening to it. That part I didn't. So there's things that. So, but bottom line is, it's not a machlekes basically. Each opinion is talking about a different aspect of Torah being given, which is a very geschmack answer. In other words, we're talking about two different dimensions of Torah basically. Which answers another question that he doesn't say specifically. We know that Alpayim Shana Kadma Torah La'elam. So we know there's a Torah before Matan Torah. So there is a state of Torah. The answer is, what kind of Torah? It's a chsuma. It's a Torah that's probably even less attached. But in other words, the blueprint that Estakal Baraisha Bara Alma happened before Mount Sinai. So really
an epic contradiction, because if chsuma, that means that Megillah Nitna Leido.
Yeah, that's the tibuch. That's the reconciliation. Good, but in the Gemara, literally, it's a chidush of chassidus. This, if you learn it literally, it's two opinions, which is fine. I mean, see, the chassidus gives such a geschmack to the whole Gemara, because the Gemara is a technical question. This now comes into more than technical. Actually, were two aspects of Torah. Okay, so now we move on. So he says to understand these two aspects of Torah.
Even Moshe Rabbeinu would not be able to understand it.
You still have to understand what that means, because did it say Vayikach Keirach l'Moshel? So if it said it, so that you have to say that it was Moshe would have understood it like an Ak. Ak also sees the picture before it happens, and without affecting Bechira. That's also correct. So even if you could read, maybe we couldn't read it that way because you have to be on that level. Because it's not just you get a peek at the future, but it could be that Moshe received a good question. That's a good question. I don't know if Moshe understood it or not. The question, it definitely had a snapshot of all of the whole picture. That's for sure. Everything that took place. Whether one could read it or not and understand is another story. That's already up. That's because the human being beside the gavra. That's because the chsaron of the person may not be able to understand. If someone showed you Ak, you may not even understand what's going on.
Moshe was able to understand Ak.
Moshe Rabbeinu was crying when he was reading the.
You could argue either way. You could say, I'm sure he had a better understanding than you and I had. The question is to what extent. We learned before that Hareinu Nos Chvedecha, that Moshe was Chachma, but he wasn't Pnimis HaChachma. That's why he wanted Chvedecha, the Chaf L'mayla Me'asrim Amma. So it's all relative at the end of the day. The bottom line is the snapshot is a big picture, and even though he doesn't bring it here in Ayin Beis, earlier he did bring how this snapshot does not affect Bechira. In other words, the fact that Ak sees the whole picture of existence from beginning to end is completely outside of existence. It's a snapshot of existence. It would be just like a bird's eye view. The bird is not affecting what it sees just because it sees the whole picture. It just is able to see what is the whole thing, not as we understand time and space, as we discussed at length. Now, I want to just add one or two more points about this whole interface. I realized that there was a chapter referred to, which I skipped it. I didn't skip it, but I didn't focus enough, I think. just tying things together for those that want to tie it together. When he spoke about Mashal Kadmeni, so Torah is the Mashal Kadmeni. He calls it the primordial Mashal. Why Mashal? Because a Mashal is a levush. A Mashal is the same idea in a different garment. If it was not the same idea, it's not a Mashal. Then it's a riddle. Then it's a chida, something else, a different. If I explain one Indian with another Indian, that's not a Mashal. If I explain to you one thing by using another idea, that's not an example. It's a different idea. Maybe one dollar. A mashal means you're taking this idea, like he said, and this idea itself is being understood with a different in a different mode, meaning in terms that you and I can relate to. That's what a mashal is. He compares it to a parsa. It's the same light, but it's coming through a curtain, through an opaque curtain. It's not a tzimtzum where the light is fundamentally shifted. Because from the mashal you could come to the nimshal. The example, the metaphor, can lead you to the moral. Or we said that the analogy can lead you to the analog. But analog is a confusing word. But so he said that on the top of page 344. So then he referred to look earlier, chapter 137. So I just wanted to touch upon that, just for those that are keeping the bird's eye view in mind. That in chapter 137 was the long discussion about Yisrael Saba Tfuna. We spoke about Moichin that relates to Midas, and Moichin as they are on their own. Talks about Primis Akav and Chetzenis Akav. There, he basically started setting the stage of the difference between the Avos and Matan Torah. So he said the Avos, their main role was to realign the universe to the way it was meant to be. The Chetei Tzadas, the tree of knowledge, the sin of the tree of knowledge, and the subsequent generations concealed the Shechina, like we learn in Bas Lagani, the Medrash, that each generation the Shechina removed itself one more level, more concealed, and Avram, he began to reverse the process. Until Moshe, the seventh generation, would bring it down with Shechante B'Seichem in the Mishkan, as it was in the beginning of creation before Chetei Tzadas. Had the Jews not built the golden calf, it says by the Gemara, Pasku Zumasa, by Matan Torah, the Zuma, the toxins, the poison, the venom that was introduced by the serpent, by the Pascha, stopped, ceased. It only returned because of the Chet HaEgel. So basically, Matan Torah was an opportunity to bring Mashiach, to reconnect. It wasn't lasting, but it gave the power to do so in a permanent way. Huh?
That's why Moshe wanted to come in and out.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. And Ma'aseh Moshe Nitzchim, if had he come in, the Beis Mikdash could never have been destroyed. Right. So Mishkan is a manifestation of the divine below. Now, the others prepare the ground because you cannot have a revelation of what they call a chodesh, a new revelation, if you don't first have your house cleaned up. It's like bringing in new furniture when you're just full of dust. So the others were like the cleaners, so to speak. But more than the cleaners, as we explained, they not just brought it back to a level they expanded the pipes, so to speak. They expanded the channels to the point of Shaddai. That's why it says Shmi Havaya Lenadait Lem, but Kel Shaddai. Yeah, Shaddai explained that length is not just Shaddai Dai enough, but Shaddai is also Ad Bli Dai, which is still Ad Bli Dai. It's still a limit because you say until you say enough. But it's in limit, it's the most you can say. It's like till Ash's Shifs Same Yemlu, what is the lashon? But there's lashon. Yivlu Shifs Same. Actually, Yivlu Shifs Same Name Die. Till the lips will rub out, will worn out from saying enough. But it's still not. So that's what the Avos did. So he explained in Ruchni is that's Yisrael Sabot Funa. What is that Naveda? That's Moichin that connects to Midas. It's a Moichin that's maturing Midas. Because remember, all Averis and all indiscretions come from subjectivity. They come from an emotional needs, my interests. Moichin, which is Torah, is meant to discipline you. A child just follows whatever it needs. Intelligence is meant to discipline and meant to mature your Midas. So the obvious you could say in Aveda, what is that? Maturing the Midas, that instead of following whatever your heart desires, you're disciplined. But then there's Meichin Be'etzem, what he called Yichud Abba V'imei Elohim. And that's like the Primius Akav. That's what he says there. That's Torah. Once you have that, the 26 generations before Matan Torah, you come to Matan Torah, now the stage is set, and now we're ready for the Hamshacha of the Mashal HaKadmeni, the primordial Mashal, where the Torah brings down, he says the Torah becomes the interface for the highest levels. I just wanted to make that connection. So now we're back to where we are with Torah being Klal and Prat. So to explain that, he goes into, begins a so-called a subplot, meaning this will take a bunch of chapters, a good, what we say, around 20 pages, I recall. No more than 20 pages, yes. Shin Mem Dalet, till on Shinayin Dalet. It's around 30 pages, actually, where he's going to discuss the nature of Torah, what Torah really is. And he begins in a very dramatic fashion, actually. Controversial, to get our attention. What is the point? The point is like this. We know that David HaMelech said, Zmiris Hayeh Lichukecha. Zmiris Hayeh Lichukecha. Which means your rules, your laws are for me or songs. And he was reprimanded for this. Now he reprimanded Nenesh. He was punished for this. Question is why? What's wrong with saying the Torah is a song? It's a shvach, it's a compliment. Imagine everybody feeling the Torah is a song, a melody to you. Right? So he begins to explain why did David say it. The reason David said it. The reason David said it was because David was, as we know, lived for a big part of his life a life of tsar, of pain, being pursued by Shaul and the other Shaul. Kol Yomov. And Tehillim was his outcry to God. And they later became a sefer that that he asked Hashem, that it became the sefer that we also would use when we pour our hearts out, which is a big part of prayer, and Tefillah comes from Tehillim and so on. So he explains, so David was Mesameach es nafshei. He rejoiced and so-called consoled himself from the Tsar through saying Zmiris Hayeh Lichukecha. How? So he makes 2 points in chapter 171. The first point is Zmiris Hayeh Lichukecha. Why is it song to me? Because David was focusing on the fact that everything in this world is dependent on Torah. That the God Hashem made it tonight in the beginning of creation. That if you keep the Torah, the world will be sustained. If not, it won't be. And Digdur Kal, meaning one detail in Torah, with that is Tali Kol Chayz V'Kima Elam. So this consoled David HaMelech, because one detail in Torah, the whole world is insignificant. So what? So how much can his problems really be significant? That's what he explains. So in other words, and he goes into detail that the Torah is about details. He brings 2 examples, Karbonis and Tefillin. The Karbonis is the whole idea is elevating existence, elevating the world, etc. But if you want a little psul, the wrong thought, in Zman HaMokim, the whole carbon doesn't do all these Hamshachas. Same thing Tefillin. All the Hamshachas of Tefillin that he brings, Meichen and Midas, but it's one psul, either in the cloth, in the parchment, or in the ink, or in the writing, or in the actual crafting of the Tefillin. The whole Hamshacha is not there. And that's how David consoled himself. That's basically saying, I'm reading now inside just to give that line. I'm reading at the bottom of page 346. It's 1/3 from the bottom. That's how David rejoiced his nefesh, his spirit, during his pain, during his troubles, during his travails, when it was not good for him. Begashmis. The ma'achas shekol ha'elim is tluim b'digduk echad the Torah. Hareinu tev semakim klal legabe ha'Torah. Being that all the worlds are all dependent on one digduk, on one detail in the Torah, so that all of it is insignificant compared to Torah. V'alkein gam etzloi lo yoyin yom tev semakim klal ha'Torah sheher b'nafshei. And that's also by him. I was focusing on Zmiris Hayeh Lichukecha. The Torah is for me a melody. It's a song. It's my joy. That transcended his challenges. And not only that, he was on the contrary, he was in great joy. The second half of the chapter, the Rebbe Rashab brings Zmiris also from the word to uproot, l'zamer, like when we uproot weeds. And he brought from Yalkut 3 interpretations in Zemer. Eis HaZomer Higia, He says there's a tide, Zman shel Arla Lizmir, time to cut. From the word Zman Shetasu Lizmira, song, and Zman shel Teira Linosin, and the time for Teira to be given, which is Zmiris. And he explains that Zmiris comes from the word to uproot, to weed out, aritzim, weeds, offshoots. And he explains this in Aveda. What is the significance? That since David was dealing with klippas, there's two ways that a klippa, a negative force, can enter into our lives, that can control us. Two ways. One is from Chetzenis HaMakif, which means from a certain state of detachment. Let's say a king is having a big simcha, so he's removed from the details. So everybody can come, the thieves, the liars, everybody comes to eat from the banquet. It's one way. So they receive from a certain type of divine detachment, so to speak, quote unquote detachment, removed from. Pnimius Makif is never removed. Pnimius Makif cares about every detail because the kavanah is exactly to be done the right way. But Chetzenius Makif, there's a state where there can be a certain type of, like when you say, the example I just gave. Another way Klippa can receive energy, glean energy, is through Ribui Tzimtzumim. The exact opposite. Total concealment. When do thieves come? Instead of a banquet of a king, when it's dark at night, everybody's sleeping. So when there's very little light, there's very little energy, that's where they come to get their little crumbs. So it's two different extremes. That's why it says Reim Miskel Grenam through Cherev Kpifiyas. Reim Miskel, that when you want to cut off what we said, the supply lines of these two supply lines, you need Cherev Kpifiyas. You need a Cherev of two edges, double-edged sword. One to cut off from the top and one to cut off from the bottom. And he brings the pasuk from Amos, which says, I'm just summing up because we learned this inside. It says, "Ve'ashmid as pirye mulmal," that I will ashmid. I will destroy from the fruit from above the fruit, ve'eshrosh of metachas, and from its root below. So he says those are the two types of power. Either it's getting it from the makiv, the chetzenius makiv, or it's getting it from ribui tzimtzumim, and that's cutting off both things. So how do you do it? So he brings in Aveda the whole approach. So Yaakov Chevel Nachlase. Yaakov is called a rope of our heritage. Chevel Nachlase is the rope of his heritage. We say, what is a rope? Why rope? So he says a rope is dangles from above down below, and if you do something below, you shake it. It also shakes it above. So therefore, Chevel Nachlase, Yaakov through his Aveda below can so-called rock the boat and eliminate these two forms of energies that flow into the negative forces. And he explains like this, that when a person contemplates on the divine, in other words, he moves away from his own self-interest, the material world, and thinks about godliness. They explain two different ways a person can do that. Not 2 days. So that awakens a feeling that he wants to get close to it. There's a consciousness. Explained there's two ways that could happen. Either the contemplation itself, the contemplation just leads to a divine feeling, or the contemplation itself is a divine contemplation, but that's not so relevant to our discussion here. So that feeling, that divine feeling that God is good for me, that causes once you are bepnimis, you feel alakus, bepnimis inside of you, it awakens like a rope, the pnimis lamaila. So pnimis hamakiv makes sure that the chetzenis hamakiv does not leave any room for troublemakers. That's one way. It's like we say, "B'layla hu nod l'shnas hamelech." While the king is asleep, it can be problems. You wake up the king to the kavanah, like someone says to the king, there are a bunch of thieves around here. So then the king says, so the Primis Hamakiv protects the Chechenis Hamakiv. Like he says, the Chechenis nigrer achara Primis. So that eliminates that supply line. And then he says, then he says, and this too also stops the energy from flowing through the Tzimtzumim. Why? Because when there's a Gilead, when you're standing in a moment of divine consciousness, you're aware of it, it's not night. There's no room for the diminishments. So the forces that will come when things are weak, like for example, where do bacteria gather? When is there possible for infection? When no one's watching. When there's no when the immune system is weak. But if you make your immune system strong and you're filled up with divine, then automatically that force does not come from the bottom. So both from the top, from the bottom. I gave an example that can be practically applied. For example, what would be a klipa from Tzimtzumim would be boredom. Boredom. What happens? It has no water. When a person is bored, they're not filled with something, they're not excited about something passionate, positive, what's going to happen? Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the psyche. What will happen is, that's where the negative forces crawl. If you're awake and alive in your Aveda, and you're passionate about it, so obviously there's no guarantees, but far greater immunity, because you're filled with a passionate shlichus. You're filled with a mission, a calling, a sense of urgency. So automatically you're avoiding that unika that can come to chitzein. Same thing the opposite way. Sometimes I give another example. Let's say, if you have people who are, God bless them, they have abundance, prosperity, grow up in an affluent home, so they have a lot. That can create a very deep form of apathy, as well as being spoiled, a sense of self-entitlement. And what happens then is the chitzenius makif, like a certain detachment. You have everything, so no one's watching. There's no discipline. So what happens then? So boredom, it's due to a lack of. Here, abundance, what's not disciplined, can also create major problems, as we see, because it's like a certain type of, I can do anything, everything goes, like the banquet example I gave before. So there too, the answer is a person focuses through through davening and through focusing and creating a divine consciousness in your presence. So both from above, Piri of Mamayla, and the Shrash of Lamata, Mitachas, you're able to cut off these two supply lines. I mean, it's a tremendous lesson in education of preventive medicine, essentially, how to stay out of trouble. Two ways to get into trouble. One is abundance that's like detached, and another is a void, a type of a very diminished place. When a person is lonely, boredom, these are forces that always you see boredom and loneliness, you right away have yourself an environment for trouble. Yeah. Good. Right.
And those are connected to
Habatola mevil de shmoma. That's what it says. Shimum, the same idea. Shimum means deterioration. Like, right?
Shimum means you move. And then
Shiyamon is that you're bored, you are empty, you don't know what to do.
Right. Okay.
If you're empty, you're empty.
Right. So now,
those two conditions of the avoidance and the void are connected to these two states of Elokus that you're saying, one is the Maki from one is
that's how they avoid. It's not two states of Elokus. It's two states of where klippas can glean energy, can nurse. We said can suck their energy. A mosquito will come to you in two ways. Either it'll come to you because there's a lot of blood and you're busy with something, so it'll just take advantage of your detachment and so-called obliviousness, or it'll come when nobody's watching and there's no. Okay. And he concludes the chapter by saying, so basically that's Remus Bekel Greinam, that when you're focused on Remus Kale, what was the word? His bonus but Remus Kale, right? That was the expression? Where was that expression? It was at the bottom here somewhere, right?
Four lines from the bottom.
Yeah. Which bottom? No, but the taich that Remus is Remus Kale, there's bonus of Remus Kale.
That's right here.
10
lines from the bottom.
Right, that's what I'm looking for. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. Right, so when you think about the grandeur of the divine, which means you think about the makif, and the godliness beyond us, that leads to the makif of illuminating the pnimi. So number one, when the makif is radiates in the pnimi, because the pnimi is subject to gradations. In the pnimi, as you go downward, it gets weaker and weaker. So when you awaken and you are concentrating and contemplating on the divine presence or divine grandeur, even better, that causes the pnimi to be saturated, and there's no room. So number one, he says that the makif affects the pnimius. Then he says Yashlemer, that actually the Gilead makif causes the pnimi itself to come alive. So the first explanation would be more that it's coming from outside of you. You're thinking about the divine, and that is somewhat keeping you busy. So there's no room for the so-called the unika. But another thing is that it actually wakens up your own resources again. So you get excited over from within, and then obviously it's even more guaranteed, even more assured. Okay, so this is very relevant to the whole interface. How the Eir HaBli Gvul is giving power to the Eir HaGvul. Does it give power because it's Eir HaBli Gvul, because it's beyond? It would be like the equivalent of when a person gets into trouble, so they go to someone greater than them and just keeps them busy and elevates them. Or they get empowered themselves to be involved in something that will avoid this negative energy from entering. I'm looking at the top of Shema Ches as we go before we go into the next chapter. And the so in chapter 82 earlier we learned that the Gili Makiv is Tom B'Maisav. He learned that he spoke there how in Makiv there's no changes. So he gave an example. What Naved is something that's not subject to change. So he brought Tmimus as an example. Tomim B'Maisav. Tmimus means innocence, sincerity, integrity. Integrity is not something that you can split into parts. You could have in Aveda many things that you can split. For example, Meichen and Midas is Pnimis Dikakeiches, faculties. So Meichen, you could have more intelligence, less intelligence. Emotions, you could be more emotionally awake and inspired, less inspired. Tmimus, integrity, there's no such thing as half integrity. If either it's integrity or it's not integrity. It's a sincerity. And if it's a sincerity, it saturates everything equally. That's in chapter 82, a whole chapter on that. He explains, so in other words, a person who's Tmimuzdik, is to say what is integrity only in one area is not integrity in another, it's like saying emes, half a truth is a lie. 99% truth is a lie. So Tmimus is a makivdika force, and when it enters in a person's life, it's not pnimiyazdik in the sense, it's not like you understand it or you feel it, but its personality is one that permeates you completely. That's what he says, that's Gilei Makiv. Shagam asi b'chinas tmimus. The inya Gilei Pnimi ki inyan chol d'rachacha da'eyu. And the example of Aved of Pnimi is chol d'rachacha da'eyu. Chol d'rachacha da'eyu means a whole different thing. Tmimus is an attitude. Where a person awakens that element of integrity, of sincerity, of pshitus, of what is it, tomim, Yaakov ish tom, wholesomeness. Chol d'rachacha da'eyu means, that whatever you do,
is the pnimism.
Yeah, that's where I'm going now. What does it mean? Whatever you go and do, whether you're working, whether you're walking in the street, whether you're commuting, whether you're davening, whatever it is, in all your ways, you should know God. This is a primis de kaved. This is very different, one aspect to the next. So when a person does that, so imagine if you were able to constantly focus, Hashgacha Pratis, everything you're doing, what's the divine message? What's my shlichus right now? That's a way of filling up your life. That doesn't allow the Chitzenis Makif from above, or the Ribut Tzimtzum from below, to enter your life. So there's two aspects, that's the two things in Aved. Gam Yesh Leimer, he says, Ke'ina Migdashe Tiro B'Lekut Teira. So I didn't look it up yet, but there in Lekut Teira clearly there's another way if he explains it. That's why through this we cut off the supply lines the yinikosam, which really means the suckling of, or the gleaning of. From Beizei Fanim in both ways, that they cannot receive, that is, who's they? The negative forces, power not from the makif, from the detached, so-called state from above, and also not from energy coming from the end of Ishtalshus, which is from a diminished state. And all this is through Neshamas Yisrael. So all this is what David HaMelech, that's what's Midas Hayalichukecha. Torah, for him, number one, this insignificance of the pains of this world, the trials and tribulations, compared to the Torah's magnitude, because the whole thing is dependent on one detail in Torah. And second, cutting off the supply lines of the negative of his enemies. It's Midas Hayalichukecha's Midas. And Navedi just explained how in Neshamas Yisrael. But all this, as we're going to learn, is he was still punished for this. He was still, can you imagine? A person, all this high level, is still not enough. Because he was focusing on something that's not the main part of Torah. And we're going to learn the main part of Torah is not what it does for you, and how insignificant the world is, and it cuts off the negative. The main part of Torah is what the power of God it reveals, that it's a divine force. So in a subtle way, obviously, anyway, we'd love to be at the level of David HaMelech. Halavai, we should see Torah this way. But relatively speaking, it just goes to show you there's a whole level of Torah revealing godliness. Shashuyim lefan of us, we'll soon learn. God's pleasures. Torah is God's amusement park. So it's going to be a whole different level. Okay. In a way, you could say that this first level of Torah seems to be somewhat, just like the Ovis have two parts. One, how they relate more to the world, and how they relate to the top of the pipe, like the source we talked about, the mouth of the well. So Torah too, there's Torah how it relates to the world, which is this, and then there's Torah that's going to reveal higher levels of the divine. It's basically what we've been learning, how the Bli Gvul looks at the Gvul, and how and impacts the Gvul, and then how the Gvul looks at the Bli Gvul.
You don't have this with Maki, which itself is Ratzon, in the level of David HaMelech. The Maki itself is Ratzon, which pleases the Eibush, or tiny.
Well, we're going to learn inside now. Vihine, chapter 172, page 348. Vihine gamzes mashichem lekalbim bezafanim now. Now he goes the other side of things. Till right now we learned how Neshamas Yisrael, through their work, they can cut off the supply lines. Now Rahman al-Islam, we're going to learn how they also can feed the supply lines. It's also totally in us. The fact that the negative forces can receive energy in these two ways, that's also dependent on the souls of Israel. Which means through arrogance. Snasus is pompousness, arrogance. Snasus is feeling superior, and Gaius is definitely arrogance. By day is Gabras Hayeshus, and through the intensification of feeling yourself as a self, me, that causes above. Remember, we said the rope. The rope does two things. The rope can prevent, but can also cause. So what do we say? How do you prevent the makif from giving energy? We said by you filling your life, and your previous is that you connect to the Reimus of Ein Sof, to the grandeur of God. But that's basically through bittul of yourself. But when a person is arrogant, what do? They awaken Menasim, the Klippas, they awaken Shaklippas Menasim Atzma L'Kabba Makafelian. They give chutzpah to the Klippa. To also say, hey, you know what? I'm also coming to the party. You're arrogant? Me too. Basically feeding that attitude. So arrogance, which we all know, what happens in arrogance? We make big mistakes when we're arrogant. Forget about the arrogance itself being inappropriate midah. What happens when you're arrogant? You're overconfident. And you think think anything, you can do anything. Look how many mistakes people have made in that mode. Jews and non-Jews, politicians and non-politicians. So that causes that the klippas should also lift themselves up. They also pick up their heads now. To what? They're also coming to receive from the Machiavellian. Arrogance, basically, in other words, creates that the Makif becomes what is it called? You say when in a party and it's everybody can come. It's one for all or something like that. Huh?
Open house.
Open house. Another word I wanted to use. That
Free for all.
free for all. Yeah, it's a free for all, basically. And now comes the second side. That's how you give them power to gather strength from the makif. And how do you give them power this other way? When a person descends tragically and falls, and brings down, how do you say, shamashpils, drags down, denigrates, drags down, defiles the chelik harasha begufei, the evil, the part of evil that's in his body, ba'avazoris, with strange desires, loves, basically lusts. But avazoris literally means strange desires or loves. But taivas eros, and foreign desires. But foreign desires. But taivas eros and evil lusts.
I don't know if there's a foreign. It's definitely strange.
Nobody understands these two words in these explanations. It's the only part of Ayin Beis that's understood. Without effort. Finally, the Rebbe Rashab, after 348 pages, mentioned something we can relate to. Until now, everything was lifnei at Tzimtzum or Natzilas and Ak. How does a Geiru L'mayla, how you read it? You have to understand. The Rebbe Rashab is looking at the world from the eyes of the divine eyes. So all these things that we struggle with are like David said, shtusim. By us, they're like mountains. What does it say? When the Rasha will see the Yetzer Hara as a little mound, the Tzaddik will see it as a big mountain. But by us, it's a major force in our. Huh?
Chut HaSayr.
Yeah, Chut HaSayr. So he says, how does it get him when a person does this? Basically, when you degrade yourself, there's a word where a person shames themselves, degrades, demeans. Yeah, this is all. Yeah, demeans themselves. All these correct. These are all fitting words. Shamashpil, demeaning is a good word. Degrade. When you basically succumb to your most base desires. This is what he's talking about. That too, like midah keneged midah. So if arrogance lifts your spirit up, it also lifts the klippas up. And you going down, debasing and demeaning yourself into this way, what does that cause? It also causes the er eliki, the divine energy, divine presence, beriba had simtsum, causes it to descend in an intensified diminishment, veriba halamas v'sterim, and intensified concealments and coverings. In other words, if you go into a place of darkness, you bring God into darkness. Godliness also goes dark. Life it's all dependent on us. When you bring, obviously the positive we'll get to, but same thing, when you arrogantly lift yourself up, you bring the klippas up. So a human being controls the destiny of existence.
That's the purpose of creation.
Yeah. And the Idr Gisa, of course, as we learned before, when you're humble, so then the makif, then the klippas also are unable to pick their heads up. And the same thing the opposite, when a person does not demean themselves and they live up to their divine image in which they were created and they behave nobly and virtuously, then Elikus also is in a more revealed state. Yeah. U'kamosh Kosov vayisach Adam vayishpel ish. Vayishach? What does it mean?
Shachar.
Oh, shachar, dark.
No,
Arab gebekt.
Yeah.
Oh, vayishach from the word shachar?
Vayishach like
Like shtachava? Like
Shtachava, yeah.
From that word? Vayishach ish. when a person bows down, vayishpalish, and yishpal is even more. Yishpal is when he like falls down. It's like a deeper, right? I would say shach is more of a bowing down. When he bows down, vayishpalish, when he lowers himself.
He spoke the ish. He's saying about the Eibishter.
He's bent over and falls down.
So he's saying the vayishach odam lamata shamashpil chelik harasha beguf, that through a person's bending down below, that like he said here, that he mashpil chelik harasha beguf. It means chelik harasha beguf is an interesting expression. What does that mean? Chelik harasha beguf. He means that the body has obviously many faculties, many possibilities. You can use your body for kedusha, but you could also succumb to using your body in the most negative way. Chelik hara. So it's not like saying the body is a bad thing, but I guess he means that there's an aspect of the body, because you can't say chelik hara. It's not like one part of the body is bad. Which part of it is bad? It's more like the aspect of the body that can be that can be very chumizdik. This could be whether it's in eating and drinking, indulging in that, or sexuality, or other things like that.
This one why it didn't say nafsha instead of gufa.
Probably, yeah. The mashpil chelik harasha beguf. I'm assuming, I'm trying to remember if I was anywhere else. That's what he has to, chelik harasha beguf. Yeah, it's like when we say that the guf is klippus negus, so there's a part of it that's ra, there's a part that's toiv.
He said it 2 lines ago also.
Yeah. That I'm just going over it again. So he mentioned it again.
Chelik harasha beguf.
Yeah. In Tanya, does he use the expression chelik harasha begufi when he talks about klippus nega? I don't think so. But b'pashtus l'chera, that's what it means. You agree? The chelik harasha b'pashtus. It doesn't mean chelik harasha. What's ra? Your eyes can be satem achrei. You could look at the wrong place. You could look at the right place. So he means the chelik harasha because gashmis is klippus nega. So there's an ability. In other words, you're basically succumbing to the negative. Ra b'chlal doesn't necessarily mean evil. Ra means negative. That's what it really means. Taivus ros.
The guf is just a chaymer. The chaymer itself has no.
No, in a chanami, but it's klippus negus, so that's why it has a tev sheb. You could say chelik hatev shebeguf, chelik harasha beguf. He does use chelik harasha beguf. That's the expression. I think that's what it means. Chelik hatev shebeguf would be when you use. It's like in Gashmis. You could say chelik harasha, but there's the two aspects of it, 2 ways of using it.
So using the word chelik over here is partially
more aspects, I think.
A specific usage of the word chelik, meaning like.
Yeah, not chelik as in there's a certain part of your body that this limb is a bad limb. There's no such thing. Okay. So that's how he teaches the pasuk. Vayishachish, vayishpalish. Ish lamata. Vayishach odom. Sorry. And when odom lamata, right? Isaiah speaks. Kav yochel hayirido shiflus de ere leki beribit tzimtzum ve'alomis. You're looking up Vayishachish. Not on the beginning.
Once in Shayo in the beginning.
Hey, we have here a resident.
No, it's not.
He went to yeshivas where they learned Tanakh.
Teach them yeshiva.
England. Okay. The reason they don't teach Tanakh is that because to do with the maskilim and that they were using it for.
I think it's important today.
I know it's critical importance. It's a big sab. But what was the reason that they started because of that? What was wrong? What was wrong in Tanakh? Because the Meises didn't was.
They used it. No, they used it.
Is they regular Meises?
You need a resident Temani.
But what did they use? Why more? Why Nach more than Terech? I mean, what's that? So put in the.
The interpreting everything in a different way. The Torah they also do.
Right, I'm saying. Okay. Anyway, so here's my friends.
Yeah.
It reminds me. It doesn't mention it, but sometimes the word from the Magid, da malamaila mimoch, that whatever is above is from you. This is very similar to the idea that how you are here, that's how, or Hashem tzilcha, that Hashem is like a shadow. So shadow follows the source. When you behave a certain way, you cast a shadow upward. It's like backwards. But yeah, so that's the same idea here. It's not pleasant to hear. Next time you get depressed, remember you cause depression on all the levels. So it's more than you've got responsibility here, more than just for yourself. That causes vayishpalish. So that's tight. Vayashach Chodam, when a person bows below and so-called succumbs to the most demeaning aspects, that causes Vayishbalish Kav Yachol, so to speak, the Yerida, the descent, the Shiflus, and the so-called Shiflus, looking for the right words, the lowering of the divine energy, Beribu Tzimtzum, in intense and increasing amount of concealments, Tzimtzumim diminishments, and Ve'alamas concealments. V'agam shal pi seder shtasus al pi maimer Kav Hamida. We're going back to Kav Hamida. Remember Kav Hamida, my friends? Avram, the Avos brought the Kav Hamida into the picture. So even though, according to Seder Shtasus al pi Kav Hamida, meaning according to the regulated flow that was meant to enter existence, Kav Hamida is what? The measuring line. We learned the Kav Hamida, we learned the measuring line. There was Knei Hamida, measuring rod. Gvura and Chesed. So according to the regular flow, think of it, the pipe that God created that should send that regulates the natural flow into existence, what it needs for existence to survive and maintain itself. So he's like asking somewhat of a question, not a question, it's a qualification. And even though, why is it dependent on us? Even the regular flow, forget about it. Even if humans were neutral, we stood aside. We weren't arrogant, we weren't demeaning, nothing. We just stood aside. The regular diminished flow of divine energy in existence also they also receive a unika, a suckling of a nursing, a diminished flow from many concealments. That's what it says. You sustain, you energize everything. What does kulam come to add? Everything. Also klipas and sitrach. So seemingly there's a question on the table here. So what do we do? What do you say here that is dependent on us? So he answers two things. So now, besides the fact, in addition to the fact, Taisvus, in other words, yes, they get a certain amount, but it's going to be a very minimal amount. And through our behavior, our degraded behavior, degradation, you give them Taisvus Yunika, which means an abundance, an additional gleaning. What's the best translation for Yunika? It's a suckling, nursing. Definitely nursing is the most accurate in the Yunika. They say, speaking Yunika, like Ibr Yunika Mech. But it could be gleaning, it could be... Anyway, it's Yunika means always a very narrow flow. That's what it means, a diminished flow. What'd you call it? Suckling?
The flow is like it dribbles.
Okay. But that's not the meaning of it. That's the way it is. Yunika means a nursing of... Okay. So first of all, you need it. Like it's understood from Eitz Chaim. Remember, this is all still the Levadzes. Like it's understood from what it says in Eitz Chaim, Shar Miyot HaYereach. In the gate that talks about Miyot HaYereach, the diminishing of the moon, HaHefresh bein HaMiyut, Hanaseh de Kitrug HaLevon v'Alidei Chet Eitzadas. She explains the difference between the Miyut, the diminishment that happened through the complaint of the moon. You know, the famous famous story, the moon and the sun were created. Shnei Me'eres Abdelim, two large bodies of luminaries. The moon came and complained, two kings can't have one crown. So we need to have one of... And what happened? God said to the moon, Lech ma'atis atzmei. That you should go diminish yourself, and that's why Moir HaGodl, Moir HaKatan. It's alluded to in the Pasuk, because first it says they're both great. Then it says one is big and one is small. How did that happen? So there's a kitzur, the moon complains. It's a very complex Gemara, because then Hashem says, that's why we bring a korban on Rosh Chodesh, because God says, Heveya alai kapara. He basically bring from me a atonement, because I diminished the moon. So of course the whole questions are asked, what's going on here? He did it, then it's atonement, what's this? But that's not for now. But the point is, we did learn about it earlier, it's a fundamental principle in Kabbalah, major, and Chassidus, the Kitrug HaLevana, because basically the Miyut HaLevana, the diminishing of the moon, let me just give a little background before we go on here, is one of the stages of, let's call it, how the universe gets disaligned from its source. So it begins with a Tzimtzum Arishon. You know, like they used to say, Begins with the Tzimtzum Adishon. What's the Tzimtzum Adishon? They used to say, it's the economy stupid. What was the problem? It's the Tzimtzum stupid. That's it. The Tzimtzum is the root of all issues. Because that's where God basically concealed His whole presence and created an inverted reality where we think we're it and the divine is a novelty, when in truth the divine is it and we're the novelty. So when you turn the glove inside out, and you suddenly think the hand is the glove and the glove is the hand, you can imagine there's going to be problems. Where the hammer thinks it's more important than the hand. Or the ship is telling the captain where to go. Which is essentially the story of our lives. The body, instead of following the soul follows the body. So, that's a tzimtzum. But the tzimtzum, there's a maimer, Al Kain Yemir Amesh and Tafresh Tzadikei from the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe, Masef Mamam Kontresim. It's a very fundamental maimer. It's based Thomas maimer, where he talks about how this so-called devolved, better said. How did it devolve? The next step is this brought Shviras HaKelim. If there was no tzimtzum, there couldn't have been a Shviras HaKelim. Why? Because when there's all-encompassing, omnipresence of the divine, everything is aligned. There's no problems. So there's only b'chal. There's nothing. There's only unity. The tzimtzum created a distortion, and the Shviras HaKelim, in a sense, is a market correction. It's almost like a protest. When things break, it's almost waking you up that something's wrong. The Eretz and Kelim are not aligned in Toyu. So Shviras HaKelim is the next step that's a result of the Tzimtzum. I'm going to go now into the psychological application of all these, because they have psychological application, each of these steps. And Shviras HaKelim is when things break in a person's life. Things give. Something's not working, it breaks. So the truth is, it's usually a gift, because it means it wasn't working. If something's cracking, it means there's a reason it's cracking. It didn't become out of nowhere. So say Sam Nastiv. The next step is the Kitrag HaLavana, Miyut HaLavana. The Lavana's complaint that there can be two, and all that means, all the significance, is another result of the Tzimtzum and the Shviras HaKelim. That's 3. And that caused the possibility, set the stage. All this is before, by the way, Adam and Chava created. Stage 4, this sets the stage of the Chet Eitzadas. That now there's a world that's there. God says, do not eat. The ability for them not to listen is a result of the Miyut HaLavana, which is evolved from the breaking of the containers, which evolves from the Tzimtzum Arish.
And like you said,
and then from there on, everything is downhill.
The Chet Eitzadas is supposed to be.
Huh?
It's supposed to be.
No, I never said that.
No,
I never said that.
Someplace
Neir Alila B'nei Adam. You bring the Neir Alila. But that's a sugya I wouldn't go to, because I think most people don't understand it, and I wouldn't go there at all. I actually would avoid it by all means. I think if people use it as an excuse to say that no matter what I do, it's all planned by God.
No,
that's the first problem with it. That's the problem.
No excuse.
So why not? If God's causing you to sin, that's it. So what's the problem?
That's
meant to be.
That's Bechira and Yediyah. Same thing, same question.
No, but but once you say sin is planned by God, you have a problem, very big problem. So you have to learn all the Maimorim to know that. We're not learning that right now. And trust me, when you learn Maimorim, it's not what you think it is. It does not in any way contradict free will. That's a rule. Free will can never be eliminated. It's the Yisod of all Torah, as the Rambam says. So what is it? You're going to bring me a Maimer from Chassidus is going to be Mevatla Halach in the Rambam that says. So it's not for now. We have to learn Maimer.
Weizmann was broken and he almost lost his mind after the Holocaust. He was a powerful man. Nobody was able to help him. They brought him to Friedrich Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "Speak." So he started to say. The Friedrich Rebbe started to cry with him for everything, and then he said, "The whole Be'er, whose fault is everything? The bottom line is the Eibishter. So don't feel he felt guilt and all kind of things. He was an amazing person. So of course you have to explain it, but
So would you say the Nazis should be prosecuted, or God just wanted it to happen? Why?
Because from their point of view they had it clear.
Okay. Anyway, this is not for now, and I guarantee you this is a very complicated topic. I would focus on the fact is The Rambam and the basis of Yiddishkeit is that everything is free will. We have free will, period. To say that we don't have free will eliminates all of Yiddishkeit. You just can't say that.
Goyim have also the same.
What does that have to do with it? Yeah, they do. They have free will, or else they have the accountability. Why not? It says a guy that learns Torah is like a kohen gadol that goes into the Holy of Holies. Are you aware of this? Gemara.
Sure.
So if they, you know, Akum Shalom Torah is kohen gadol shenichnas lefnei lefnim. The Gemara says. Akum. And Rashi said and then they ask, he says somewhere else, Akum shechayet limitei chayav misa. So it says b'sheva mitzvahs did who? And there's the whole Hilchos Shmita v'Yevel. Kol ish v'isha shenod v'ruchei. The Rebbe makes a whole bunch of ha'aras that ish v'ish is Jew and non-Jew. Yeah. This is a sugi I know very well because I deal with a lot of non-Jews, and I turgit on the sugi zeh shtak.
So you're saying the Nefesh Elokis really has no bearing, Our Bechira is there, not in spite of, but superseding the Nefesh Elokis. Because we have Nefesh Elokis, good, but Bechira we have just like every other human being, Goy, Bahabil, and Jew. And the Nefesh Elokah is additional, extra what?
Well, the whole Tanya is based that there's a battle between the two nefashos. What do you mean? They're equal battle. Nefesh Habam is on one side, Nefesh Elokis, and they battle all the time. That's the whole battle. The whole Tanya is based on that battle. According to Tanya, that the whole point is that there's a battle. That's where free will comes in, because there's a battle.
So then Yehudi has that also or not?
Subtly in their things, yeah. Certain matters, yes. Yeah, you have to say that.
What's the mechanics that they have?
They were created b'tzelem Elokim, in divine image, and they also have a selfish side. You want a pasuk in Kehelis, Ruach Ha'adam El Lamayla, Ruach Ha'adam Behemi Eredis Lamata. Right. I can give you all the sources of it if you want afterwards. We talked about it many times. Basically, the view of Jew and non-Jew, I would say almost everyone I've met really does not understand the Rebbe's approach to this, especially today. The real issue with Goyim, by the way, is not human beings. It's an archetype. What does Goyishkeit mean? Goyishkeit is an archetype. It's an archetype, just like in Ruchnius, what's Goyishkeit in Atzilus, or in Bria? So most of us don't think of it. There's two sides to everything. Take away the personal. Forget about us on earth. There are two forces in existence. There's a Kedusha, there's the opposite of Kedusha. The question is, what manifests down below here? Now Mashiach comes and says that the whole world will be busy with knowing God. Let's talk about all non-Jews. So what does that mean? That the Goyishkeit in them will have become this battle. Not that they become Jewish, but that they have their Kedusha through their work. They don't have to be Jewish to be divine. The problem is if the Goy Lamata is manifest Klippa and Sitra Achra, then that's what we call don't be the Maisa Kanani. See, we talk about these things in very primitive ways. You know, the Chumash it says don't be like the Maisa Kanani, because they then represented paganism and Avodah Zarah and selfishness and everything that was corrupt. And Avram Avinu came to fight that. But let's say Avram Avinu finishes his job and changes the whole world. The whole world is suddenly Abrahamic. So there's still a goy as in a nation of the world, but it's a goy that's aligned to Tzelem Elokim. What's wrong with that? See, we suffered so much at their hands. I think we all developed a very strong attitude that a goy basically means an enemy, an anti-Semite, a murderer. Like, you know. But that is not going to bring the Geula type of attitude. Now, I'm not saying you don't lock your doors and listen. Frankly, many Jews Lamata also don't manifest pure Kedusha the way their Sheresh and Neshama is. So we got all the problem with the disalignment. The point is to align human beings on earth with what God wants of them. A Jew in his way, a non-Jew in his way. It's just, that's what it comes down to. And you have to get rid of the parochialism and the so-called partisanship of Jew and non-Jew. That's the way I see it. That doesn't mean there's no Havdalah, but it's a Havdalah like the difference between a heart and a mind, or between the food pipe and the windpipe. In other words, this idea that we feel superior, supremacy, is a human frailty. I feel I have to kneel superior to you. You're the animal, I'm the human being. I know this goes counter. I also grew up in this. I know it goes counter to the way we think, but you have to not think personally. This is think, what does God want? This still doesn't negate the fact that they were Nazis or they did what they did. And yes, and there is will. Free will. There's a discussion. It's not my. By the way, what I'm saying here is nothing here is chiddush of mine. I could show you to all the sources. I just was relevant to me because when I wrote Torah Meaning Life and I had to deal with this, I had to deal with the real philosophical underpinnings. Most of us don't have to deal with it because it's more, it's like a concept.
So I accept what you're saying. So now then, what does it mean that it draws on Shalokis? What is that? What is that moisif over?
It's not the topic that we're learning now, that's for sure. But and so like Noid Alila is not the topic. But let me just suffice it to say the following. I'll bring you to read the Sikha Noyach and Chelik Tezvov. The Sikha about Akum Sheshavas Chayev Misa. Why a non-Jew cannot keep Shabbos. Yeah, that answers your question. And there's a second Sikha, which I don't remember exactly when it was in the Mems, about Ribis. I'll just tell you briefly, because since it's fundamental, there's the question, why can a non-Jew not keep Shabbos? According to the Chinuch, the reason we keep Shabbos is to remind us that there's a Creator. So what's wrong with non-Jews knowing there's a Creator? Isn't that one of the Shav Mitzvahs? So why is they not allowed to keep Shabbos, even if they want to? There's a whole discussion whether they can keep Shabbos on Sunday, or it's only Saturday. That's... And the Rebbe's answer is brilliant and just right straight to the point. A similar question he asked, I'll tell you the answer in a moment. Similar question he asked about Ribus. Why does it say it's a mitzvah to take interest from non-Jew? A Jew, you're not allowed to take interest. First of all, what kind of discrimination is that? What does that mean? That's like, either it's right or it's wrong. If it's a wrong thing to do, how could you do it to non-Jew? If it's a right thing, it's a right thing. The Rebbe's answer to both these questions is completely disarming, very completely counterintuitive. You know what he says? He says, what's wrong with taking interest from the first place? I buy a pair of shoes for $100, I sell to you for $120. Is there anything unethical about that? That's if I sell to you for $100, I will have no parnasa to pay for a chinuch of my children. So profit is not unheard of. It's actually the way of the world. So why not? If I have cash and you need cash, cash is just it's a value. So I give it to you. We're not talking about obscene interest, a normal interest rate. You need cash now, you don't have it. Give me 120 back for the 100 I give you. What's wrong with it?
I think that was just because Adam la'amal yulav, not the money. The person has to work.
So the answer the Rebbe gives is because achicha. There's nothing wrong with the ribus. There's nothing wrong in the normal course of business. The problem is achicha. The Torah says, since he's your brother, the Torah is expecting from you a higher standard. That you should go so-called beyond the letter of the law. I mean, here now it's law, but beyond the letter of the human law. In other words, it's not a discrimination against the non-Jew. It's saying your family, with your brother, you behave a little better than you would behave in the street, essentially. Which is also should be ethical. That doesn't mean it should be unethical. It means that's number one. And if you don't do it, you're irresponsible. Same thing with Shabbos. The Rebbe says like this. Shabbos introduces a dimension of Alakus in the world that's higher than the Welt. Since Adam Al-Yavala and a person is created to work, what do you mean one day in the week you don't work? You're wasting time. So the shamas of non-Jews are mamala kalam. Their role is to transform the world. So their job is all the time working with the world. A Jew introduces a dimension of divine that's beyond existence. And therefore, so it's not that it makes a guy the inferior. Mamala kalam is alakus, but it's alakus in Welt. That's why there's a mitzvah for the 6 days of the week. If he wants to keep Shabbos, he's not allowed to. So just like it's a mitzvah to work the rest on Shabbos, it's a mitzvah to work on other days. That part, now people forgot. Mm-hmm. The Mechilta says, Sheshes Yom Tasim Malach. It's a mitzvah. Tasim Malach is just as much mitzvah as Shabbos. Really? The point is, to refine the world is their role. So refining the world is 24/7 type of thing. The bottom line is, I would say briefly, that there was a time for sure, there was a time where the whole world was in a lower place. Avram Avinu came into a pagan world, complete Avodah Zarah. Okay? And he rose up above them. So then you had that. Then the world, as Avram grew, and his children did, the world also became more refined. So Mashiach, so it's not like they're down, and everything comes more refined. That doesn't mean the Jew does not have, the neshama has new dimensions of the divine to reveal. But if every human being, every Jew kept the Shev Mitzvah, nothing else, God forbid, we have Mashiach here. What is Shev Mitzvah? They're basically the 10 Commandments except for Shabbos and Kibbutz Av. That's what Shev Mitzvah, no theft, no murder, no all the other stuff. We'd have a Mashiach world. Shev Mitzvah, only Shev Mitzvah. How do you like that?
What did he say about Yoshka?
What does Yoshka have to do with this?
He said Sika and Yoshka.
Who said?
I thought that's what you said.
I never mentioned him.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
I have to do some tshuva if you even thought I mentioned it. Well, the Rambam says that Christianity and Islam paved the way toward Mashiach with all the God's mysterious ways. They did something. So clearly there's something accomplished, and it's completely off the point. But I can elaborate more. I have plenty to say on this topic. Go to page 230 in Chelik Yud Gimel Likutei Sichos. Write that down. Learn the Ha'aris on page 230. It's a Yud Beis Tammuz letter, so it's fitting to this time.
Chelik Yud
Gimel Likutei Sichos, page 230.
Yud Gimel 230.
Read Noach and that, and you'll have a new look on things.
That's the letter in the back, right?
Yeah,
Which one?
it's a letter.
Yud Gimel 230.
Okay. In a few minutes. Okay, so here we go. So now he's saying, so we spoke about Miyat HaLavona. So he says, what's the difference between the diminishing that happened through the complaint of the Lavona and through Chet Tzadas? The Imei Yesh the B'Shneim Nishra B'Chinas HaMalchus Nakun Kuda Achas. Even though through both of them, Malchus remained one small point. She'enukuda Hashroshis. So think of it like the new moon. The diminishment happened that Malchus was deprived of the Gilui of Zah. Basically works like this. A full moon is the moon is right across the sun and the angles toward Earth. And the moon is filled with, like we learned earlier, that not just the 5 lower spheres of Malchus, but the whole of Malchus is illuminated. That's a sign of Geula. That's a sign of Beis Hamikdash. It says in the time of Shlomo Melech, the moon was always full in that way. He was the 15th generation from Moshe. So Kaimasira B'Shlemusa, it's a sign. Yisrael Deim Levana Mein Levana. We compared to the moon. What do we say? Shehem Asidin L'Schadish Kamesa. The moon is a symbol of the ups and downs of life, Jewish life especially. That just about by point of extinction we are reborn. But a full moon, that's why all the Yom Tovim are a full moon. Sukkot, Pesach, Purim. Rosh Hashanah is a new moon. Tisha B'Av is considered to be the lowest point because Tisha B'Av is 9 and not 10. 9 of. It's missing the Malchus. And that's why the 15th of Av is the biggest Yontif. This all speaks to the Maimarim because it's the rebound after the Yerida. So bottom line is Malchus is the one that suffers most. In simple English, dignity, human dignity suffers most when so Malchus is deprived. That was what the Kitrug HaLavana did. Deprived the moon of its energy, Malchus. So he says both of them, both the Mirtei Reach, the diminishing of the moon, and the eating of the tree of the sin of the tree of knowledge, both cause Malchus to be just a Nekuda. What's a Nekuda? Shrashis. That all is left is the root. Imagine a beautiful tree, right? A beautiful tree stripped of everything, and all that's left is this minimal root. That's like Churban. That's what destruction does. It's like everything burns down except the foundation. Is you alright? Are you alright?
Need a drink?
Hine be'es hakitrug nistalka tesfiras all l'mayla. During the be'es, besides the kitrug, another the time when the moon complained, what happened? The 10 spheres were removed, and they went upward. They like nistalka and all l'mayla. So all was left was basically bare Malchus, a bare and naked Malchus. We say, for example, Nachamu, Echa Yoshva Bodad. Woe, Yirmiyahu says, that she sits alone. Who's she? Yerushalayim. In Ruchni sits Malchus. Malchus sits alone. No one there to watch over her. Malchus is Knesset Yisrael. all that level. That's through the Kitzur Galavon. V'ayde Tzadas yordu hatasfiris b'mokam haklipa. So what does it say in Eitz Chaim? The Chet Tzadas, however, did something much worse. The Kitzur Galavon, remember, is not even a sin really. Kitzur Galavon is the moon's complaint because it was looking for balance, whatever the reasons behind it. And what did that cause? That the moon should be diminished. Chet Tzadas caused something worse. The Tesviras didn't just remove themselves; they went down in Mokam HaKlippa. Remember, we were talking before what happens when we behave in a demeaning way. It causes the Klippa to go down. That's what he's answering. This is still the first answer, by the way. That means through the sin causes a Tesu Sinika. So without the Chet Tzadas, without human behavior, you still have a Yanika. Why? Because Malchus is diminished, and therefore when it's diminished, there's going to be some energy flowing into the negative. But it's not it's not a abundant amount. When Chet Tzadas, that causes the Tesviras to go the wrong place altogether. There, they're removed, and they're just not effective. Here, they're actually going in the wrong place. Tesviras, they go into the Klippa. Now that's the Levadzes. Now comes something. Now there's something even worse. It's a very depressing little chapter here. Okay. Oh, this is strong. This is good.
Don't be depressed.
I'm not depressed.
It affects many things above us.
Just the opposite.
I'm not depressed at all.
You know the problem.
I'm not depressed. I feel vindicated.
You found the problem.
For something much worse. Not that just it adds energy, it causes that the tzimtzum should become almost as if they're compelled. Kavyachal, so to speak. That tzimtzum shall be said because the diminishments according to the regular cosmic order. They're all willing tzimtzumim. When God says, when a teacher says, I want to conceal my brilliant wisdom in order to convey an idea, that's a plan. That's a premeditated concealment with the intention of revealing. That's not really a concealment. Why? Because it's known that any confinement that is willed is not a true confinement. If you say you want to sit in this chair, no one's compelling you to do so, then it's the same free spirit as you moving about. It's you wanting to do that. It's a big sugi in Chassidus. That's why the Keich HaGvul of the Eibishter is not a real Gvul, because it's just a Keich HaGvul. He wants now to manifest between the two Badei Aron, the two rods of the ark. Who can make a tzimtzum l'tzeini, the same thing a tzimtzum l'tzeini, a willing that no one's forcing you, no one's compelling you. What's a prison? When someone puts you in prison. But if you yourself pick yourself up and say, I want to go to a certain place and stay there, it's fundamentally it's not real tzimtzum because it's by choice. That means in all the concealment that he conceals himself, how he conceals himself, and in every place that he conceals himself, kavyachol, so to speak, even the lowest levels, it's not that he must do so, rather it's willed. But when a human being below sins, they cause that this tzimtzum should be as if compelled. So give the example would be, I don't know if he's going to give this example, but imagine, the father, the example of this is that the father hides from his child in order to bring out his ingenuity. Right? The father hides from the child. I remember when the Rebbe said the Sikha, wow, the B'chiyas, the tears that came out from the Rebbe. So the father hides from the child for only one reason. It's not a real tzimtzum, like he says. It's a willing one. He wants to hide because he believes in the child's ingenuity and strengths and resources, and knows that that the child will apply himself, will find Hashem, find God. What happens if the child stops looking? That's the chet. So till now, fine, it's a tzimtzum, and a potential could be problems, but also potential can bring unbelievable greatness. What happens if the child stops looking? Because the father is so good, he hid himself so well, the child gives up. Now, Kavyochel, you're causing the tzimtzum to be compelled. Because the father can't just come out, because it defeats the whole purpose of the creation. So you're forcing him to stay in hiding, and he doesn't want to stay in hiding. Now, it's a Kavyochel, it's not forcing mamish, but you are controlling somewhat the destiny. And that's the tragedy here.
That's one way. That's one way to interpret it.
I gave a mashal for it. Yeah, but he definitely says, I want to just give an example. It means hachrachi. It means, in other words, the chet is causing the tzimtzum to become more real than it was meant to be. It's like you took God's concealment too seriously. That's the problem. Even though above is not possible to say he must compels, what does that mean? Look at these words there. That God bound himself to neshamas. It's unbelievable. That he says meh. He bound him. It doesn't say meh. He speaks about it, and how do you translate meh? One has bound himself. Kavyochel. So that means because God bound himself to us, so according to our actions of the Neshamas Yisrael below, that's what we cause above. And that is, God forbid, like as if we compel. Wow. So you see here,
If two people are fighting each other, one is going this way, he's
exactly like the rope. Now, but the thing is like this. The interesting thing is, this is also Beratzen. He bound himself to us.
You can always attach the rope.
No, but it can't. You see, that's what he says. No, because his binding to us is not the same. Ratzon before the tzimtzum is a ratzon that he didn't bind himself to be a tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is necessary to reveal. But bind himself to Neshamas Yisrael is a far deeper binding. That's why he calls it Kein Achrachi. It's not like...
No, the Kein Achrachi is after he bind himself. The binding himself is a Ritzayim.
So I'm explaining it's not the same Ratzon as the Tzimtzum. Because then the answer is not an answer. And then there's no answer to the question. He said like this: a Tzimtzum that he wants to do is not a Tzimtzum. Why? Because the tzimtzum is not because of the tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is in order for the gili. But he binds himself to Neshamas Yisrael is not just like a side thing he wants. It's a real... No, it doesn't say that. Where does it say that? It doesn't say that here. You're saying that. It doesn't say such a thing here. He says... Ke'ein hachrachi. That's what he says. Ke'ein hachrachi. It's I'm explaining that he has to say it's more that tzimtzum is only a stepping stone. Neshamas Yisrael is not a stepping stone. There is a fundamental bond between us, and therefore, when we do something, it creates something deeper than the tzimtzum does. If it's a tzeni like the tzimtzum, then there's no change. So everything is ratz.
Tanya says that he's mashpil, it's a melech.
That's what I think he's going to bring here.
Well, he's not saying Kein Achrachi about this kashrus binding himself. He's not saying it.
So why is that Kein Achrachi the tzimtzum itself? What do the Neshamas Yisrael make more achrachi than tzimtzum does?
Because he wants to...
First of all, where are you getting that it's saying these guys? It doesn't say these words. This is your words.
Yeah, my word.
Good. It doesn't say that here. So fine. I have no problem with that. But they cannot say that binding to the Neshamas Yisrael is like his... Because you could say that he bound himself to do a tzimtzum. So it's also Kein Achrachi. You could say the same thing. He chose to do a tzimtzum, so he's also bound himself. I'm trying to say that binding to the Neshamas Yisrael is deeper. You have to say that. There's no question about it. Or else it's not. Then what? He can just free himself from anything.
Okay, it's not achrachi, it's deeper. It's not achrachi.
I didn't say it's achrachi. I said to you that the bind is not the same thing like the tzimtzum. I explained why. I said for the fourth time I'm saying the same thing. Because the tzimtzum is a means to another end. And it's Neshamas is not a means to another end. If he binds him to Neshamas Yisrael, that's the kavanah. Tzimtzum, no. So that, if the child, for example, finds the father, the Rebbe is the most simcha. With Neshamas Yisrael, it's not like that. Because if he could just pull out with Neshamas Yisrael, so then we're back to what's that achrachi? He pulls out. The Jews sinned, I'm out of here.
That's what people say happened by the Churban Beis Hamikdash.
Okay, but he's saying not like that. Loy dayan l'deshoyin el shematzrich nesim machsim nesim bal korach. I think I'm going to stop here because we're going to stop here. Okay, so we did the beginning of chapter 172, page 348.